The South Pole was a place of quiet desolation, where endless fields of ice stretched beneath the cold, pale sky. Dr. Simons and his team of scientists had grown accustomed to the isolation and the steady hum of their equipment as they studied the effects of climate change. Days blurred together in the biting cold, but this day was different. Without warning, the instruments began to detect something strange. It wasn't a typical seismic tremor, nor a sign of an ice shelf cracking. It was something far more unsettling. A rhythmic pulse, like the beating of a massive, unseen heart deep beneath the ice. The pulse grew stronger, reverberating through the station as the scientists gathered around the monitors, bewildered and intrigued. "What's causing this?" Ellen, the team's geophysicist, asked, her voice tinged with unease as she stared at the data streaming in. The pulse was steady, powerful, and unlike anything they had ever recorded. Dr. Simons furrowed his brow, his breath visible in the freezing air of the station. "I don't know," he replied, but the look on his face told them all they needed to know. This was no ordinary event. The pulse was coming from deep beneath the ice, from a location they hadn't mapped or explored. After a brief discussion, the team decided they had to investigate. Armed with their equipment and gear, they embarked on a dangerous expedition, driven by equal parts curiosity and dread. The frozen wasteland outside was relentless as the snowstorm intensified, but the pulse continued, leading them toward a spot miles away from the station. As they approached the source, they found something unimaginable, a vast, towering structure buried deep beneath the ice. Its walls were ancient, carved with runes and symbols that seemed to hum with the same eerie energy they had detected earlier. The structure was unlike anything they had seen, an architectural anomaly in a place that should have been untouched by man. Breaking through the ice, they entered the structure. Inside was a cavernous hall of ice and stone, and at the far end, seated on an icy throne, was something far more disturbing. A 30-foot-tall angelic figure, wings folded, eyes closed as if in deep slumber. The figure exuded a sinister energy, and the temperature seemed to drop even further as they approached. "Is that an angel?" Sam, the youngest of the team, whispered, his voice trembling. The figure was unlike any depiction of an angel they had ever seen. Its body, though humanoid, seemed otherworldly. Its skin like marble, its wings enormous and imposing, spanning the width of the cavern. Its eyes were closed, but a sense of looming dread filled the air as they stepped closer, as though they were trespassing on something sacred and dangerous. Before they could take another step, the angel's eyes snapped open, glowing with a light that seemed to pierce through their very souls. A deep rumbling filled the chamber, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The angel slowly unfurled its wings, and the pulse they had been tracking grew stronger, now emanating from the being itself. The angel's gaze was cold, merciless, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for them. "You are too late," the angel said, its voice echoing with power and authority that shook the very foundations of the cavern. "I have been waiting to pass judgment." The cavern was silent, save for the lingering echo of the angel's voice, which reverberated off the ancient walls. The scientists stood frozen in place, gripped by a fear they had never known before. The being before them was immense, towering over them like a monument to an era long forgotten. Its wings, now partially unfurled, shimmered with an otherworldly light that only heightened their sense of dread. The angel shifted on its icy throne, its glowing eyes locking onto each of them. Dr. Simons, heart pounding in his chest, forced himself to speak, though his voice trembled. "What do you mean, judgment? Who are you?" The angel's gaze did not waver. "I am the judge of mankind, sent to deliver the final verdict upon your kind," it said, its voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. "I have watched your world for millennia. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, and I have cleansed them when they strayed too far from the path. The Great Flood, the fall of Atlantis. These were but warnings. The scientists exchanged glances, the weight of the angel's words sinking in. This creature, this being, claimed to be behind some of the most catastrophic events in human history. Ellen, trying to steady her breathing, took a step forward. But those are myths, stories. How can you? They are truth, the angel interrupted, its voice as sharp as a blade. You believe them to be myths because your kind forgets. You forget the lessons of the past, the warnings given to you by the Creator. Each time, you fall into arrogance and corruption, and each time, you are cleansed. Now, you stand on the precipice once more. The angel's wings flared slightly, sending a gust of freezing wind through the cavern. Your world has become a plague upon itself. You poison the land, the seas, the sky. You wage endless wars, driven by greed and hate. You squander the gifts given to you. And now, the time has come to purge your kind once again. Dr. Simons felt the blood drain from his face. Purge? You mean to destroy us? The angel's eyes, glowing brighter now, narrowed. Not all will perish, it said, its tone chilling. But most. Humanity, in its current form, has failed. You were given free will, and with it, you have chosen destruction. I have waited here, bound by the Creator's command, from the moment when the scales would tip beyond redemption. That moment has come. Sam, unable to contain himself any longer, shouted, "You can't do this. We've come so far. Technology, medicine, art. There's so much good in the world." The angel's wings shifted again, and its voice grew even darker. Your progress is an illusion. For every step forward, you take 10 steps back. Your technology has wrought more devastation than it has salvation. Your medicine prolongs life, but it cannot cure the disease of the soul. You heal one wound only to inflict 10 more. Your art, it has lost its soul. Ellen's voice cracked as she spoke, tears brimming in her eyes. We're trying. There are good people. People who care, who are making a difference. You can't just give up on us. The angel's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. There are always a few who carry the light, but the many drown them out in darkness. The Creator's patience has run out. This world must be cleansed, just as it was before. A silence fell over the group, a suffocating realization that they were standing in the presence of a being who had the power to bring about the end of the world. Dr. Simon's mind raced, trying to think of some way to reason with this ancient entity. There must be another way, Dr. Simon said, his voice low but firm. You said yourself, not all of us are corrupt. You can't judge the whole of humanity based on the actions of the worst among us. The angel's expression was unreadable, its eyes flickering with ancient wisdom and cold detachment. You speak of mercy, it said, its voice quieting to a deadly whisper. But mercy has been given, time and time again. The Creator's mercy allowed you to survive the flood, to rebuild after Atlantis, to learn from your mistakes. Yet here you are, standing at the edge of oblivion once more. What you ask for is not mercy. It is indulgence. The ground trembled beneath their feet, as if the earth itself responded to the angel's growing power. The air became heavy, and the temperature dropped further. The angel rose from its throne, its wings spreading wide, casting the cavern into deep shadow. I have seen what you refused to see, the angel declared. Your fate has already been written. Humanity will be cleansed as it was before. Only those who still carry the light of creation within them shall remain. The rest will be erased. The scientists stood in stunned silence, their pleas falling on deaf ears. The angel had passed its judgment, and they could feel the weight of it crushing down upon them. Dr. Simons, Ellen, and Sam exchanged helpless glances, realizing the gravity of what they had unleashed. The angel's voice rumbled through the cavern one final time. The reckoning begins. The cold air in the cavern felt like it was closing in around them, suffocating, as if the angel's judgment had already begun to manifest. The weight of its words hung heavy in the silence that followed. Dr. Simons stood frozen, his breath shallow, his mind racing for any possible way out of this. There had to be something, anything, that could stop this ancient being from erasing humanity. "We can't just let this happen," Ellen whispered, her voice trembling but determined. She turned to Dr. Simons, desperation clear in her eyes. "We have to convince him. There's still hope. There's always hope." Dr. Simons swallowed hard and took a shaky step forward, facing the towering angel who now loomed over them, wings fully spread, casting long shadows across the icy walls. "Wait," he shouted, his voice cracking with fear and urgency. "Please, listen to us. You talk about humanity's sins, about the darkness in our hearts, but we're not all like that. There are people, good people, who spend their entire lives helping others. People who devote themselves to healing the sick, to protecting the environment, to spreading kindness. Doesn't that mean anything?" The angel's glowing eyes flickered slightly as it regarded Dr. Simons with cold indifference. "You speak of kindness," it said, its voice low and resonant. "Of fleeting acts of goodness in a sea of hatred and greed. For every soul who seeks to heal, there are 10 who seek to destroy. You heal one wound, only to inflict 1,000 more upon yourselves and the world you inhabit." Ellen stepped forward, her breath visible in the freezing air. "But we've made progress. We've overcome so much. We've cured diseases, we've explored the stars, we've connected the world. We've created art and music that express the deepest parts of our souls. We love. Isn't that worth something?" The angel's wings shifted slightly, creating a gust of icy wind that sent chills down their spines. "Your progress is nothing more than a mask," the angel replied, its voice cold and emotionless. "Beneath it lies the same corruption that has plagued humanity since the beginning. You speak of love, but how often does that love turn to hatred? How many wars have been fought in the name of love, of righteousness? Your kind is flawed, broken." Dr. Simons felt the words hit him like a physical blow, but he refused to give up. "We're not perfect. I know that. But that's the point, isn't it? We try. We're capable of change. We've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we learn. We grow. Isn't that what matters?" The angel's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter, as if considering his words. "You are capable of change, yes," it said slowly, "but you choose not to. For every step toward the light, you take 10 steps back into the shadows. You have been given countless chances, and each time you have failed. Why should this time be any different?" Ellen's voice broke as she spoke, her hands trembling. "Because we haven't given up. We're still trying. You can't just erase us. You can't decide that we're beyond saving." The angel's wings flared, and the ground beneath them trembled once more. "I do not decide," it said, its voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The Creator has seen your world. The Creator has judged. I am but the instrument of that judgment." Sam, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his face pale but his voice firm. "So you're saying we don't even have a chance? That we're just supposed to stand here and accept this? You talk about free will, but what kind of free will is that? You're condemning us without even giving us a real choice." The angel's gaze turned to Sam, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in its eyes. Something that might have been hesitation or doubt. "You were given a choice," it said quietly. "The choice to live in harmony with the world around you, to nurture, to protect. And you failed." Dr. Simons saw an opening, a sliver of hope in the angel's response. "But not all of us have failed," he pressed. "We're not all the same. Yes, there are those who destroy, but there are those who build. There are those who hate, but there are those who love. Can't you see that? Can't you see the potential in us?" The angel's eyes flickered once more, and for a moment, the cavern was silent, save for the low hum of the angel's energy pulsing through the walls. It seemed to be considering, weighing their words. Then, slowly the angel lowered its wings, though its gaze remained piercing and cold. "You speak well," it said, its voice quieter now. "You plead for mercy, for a chance. And yet, history has shown that mercy is wasted upon your kind." The scientists exchanged desperate glances, realizing they had managed to plant a seed of doubt, but the angel was not yet swayed. "You ask for more time," the angel continued. "But time is what has allowed your kind to spread like a plague. You ask for redemption, but redemption must be earned, not begged for." The ground trembled once more, and the cavern seemed to shrink under the weight of the angel's words. Dr. Simons knew they were running out of options. This being was not moved by their fear or their desperation. It demanded something greater, something deeper. And as the angel's judgment hung over them like the sword of Damocles, the scientists realized that their fate, and the fate of all humanity, rested on a final desperate plea. The angel towered over the scientists, its glowing eyes flickering with divine intensity as it prepared to deliver its final judgment. Dr. Simons, Ellen, and Sam stood rooted in place, overwhelmed by a deep sense of dread. Their arguments had struck a chord, but they knew it wasn't enough. The angel, the embodiment of judgment itself, was not easily swayed. "You ask for mercy," the angel repeated, its voice low and dangerous. "But mercy has been extended to you time and again. Humanity has been given second chances, more than it deserves. Yet, each time, you squander those chances. You repeat the same mistakes, driven by greed, power, and the thirst for control." The scientists remained silent, listening as the angel's words cut deeper with each passing moment. "You speak of progress," the angel continued, its tone growing more menacing. "But what has that progress brought you? Wars fought over borders that mean nothing. Wealth hoarded by the few while the many starve. Your earth, the gift given to you, polluted and dying. You build monuments to yourselves, and yet you tear each other down." Ellen, fighting back tears, shook her head. "Not everyone is like that. There are people who are trying to make a difference. People who are working to save the planet, to heal the wounds caused by others." The angel turned its gaze to her, its expression unreadable. "You speak of the few," it said coldly, "but the many drown them out. The voices of destruction and hate are far louder than the whispers of kindness and healing." Sam, his voice hoarse, muttered, "So, what? There's no hope for us?" The angel's eyes flared with light, and the temperature in the cavern seemed to drop even further. "There was hope once," it said. "But your kind has chosen to bury that hope beneath centuries of bloodshed and cruelty. You were given the gift of free will, the power to choose your path. And this is the path you have chosen." Dr. Simon's mind raced, searching for some way to argue, some way to prove the angel wrong. But the angel's words were undeniable. Humanity had done unspeakable things. There was no escaping that truth. The angel continued, its voice like thunder. "I have seen the rise and fall of empires. I have watched as your ancestors built civilizations, only to tear them down with their own hands. Each time, you rise from the ashes, and each time, you repeat the same cycle. Destruction is in your nature. You cannot escape it." The cavern trembled as the angel's wings extended, casting an even darker shadow over the scientists. "You speak of change, of the potential for good," it said. "But the truth is that your kind is beyond redemption. You have been weighed, and you have been found wanting." Dr. Simons felt the full weight of the angel's words pressing down on him. The realization struck like a hammer. No matter how hard they tried, no matter how much good they accomplished, humanity's sins were too vast to overcome. The angel's judgment was absolute. "You are a plague upon this world. the angel said, its voice rising with fury. "And now it is time to cleanse the earth of your corruption." The ground beneath their feet cracked, the ice splitting with a deafening roar. The scientists stumbled, barely keeping their footing as the entire cavern seemed to shift. The temperature plummeted, and a biting wind swept through the space. The angel's glowing eyes narrowed, and it raised one hand toward the heavens, as if calling down judgment from above. "Your time is over." Desperation clawed at Dr. Simon's chest. This was it, the moment of reckoning. But something deep inside him refused to give up. "Wait," he cried, his voice hoarse and raw. "You're right. We've made terrible mistakes. We've done things that are unforgivable. But isn't that the point of free will? To learn from our failures, to keep trying, even when we fail?" The angel's hand paused midair, its gaze shifting to him. Dr. Simons took a deep breath, knowing this was their last chance. "We're flawed," he admitted. "We're broken. But we keep trying. That's what makes us human. We don't give up, even when it seems impossible. If you destroy us now, you'll never know if we could have become something better." The angel's eyes flickered, the divine light within them shifting, as if it was contemplating his words. "There are still those who carry the light," Dr. Simons continued, his voice steady now. "There are still people worth saving. Don't condemn us all because of the worst among us. Give us a chance to prove that we can change." For a moment, there was silence. The ground stopped shaking, and the wind died down. The angel lowered its hand slowly, its wings folding in slightly as it regarded the scientists with an unreadable expression. "You plead well," the angel said, its voice quieter now. "But words alone cannot undo the damage that has been done. Your fate is sealed." The cavern trembled once more, but this time it felt different, less violent, more restrained. The angel took a step back, its wings folding fully behind it. "Yet," it added, "the Creator has given me one final command, to spare those who still carry the light of creation within them." Dr. Simons, Ellen, and Sam exchanged looks of disbelief, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Not all will perish," the angel said, its voice now softer, though still filled with a dark authority. "But only a few. The rest of humanity will fall, and from the ashes, you will have one last chance to rebuild." The scientists could barely believe what they were hearing. A sliver of hope had appeared, thin as it was. "But know this," the angel warned, its eyes narrowing once more. "If you fail again, there will be no more mercy. This is your final chance." With that, the angel turned away, its wings unfurling again as it began to ascend toward the frozen throne from which it had come. The judgment had not been fully carried out, not yet. And as the cavern settled into an uneasy stillness, the scientists knew that their future, and the future of all humanity, now hung by the thinnest of threads. The cavern's silence after the angel's declaration was deafening. The scientists, still processing the magnitude of what had just transpired, felt as though they were standing on the edge of a precipice. The air felt thick with tension, and even though the earth had stopped trembling, a deep unease settled over them. Dr. Simon's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Relief that they hadn't all been wiped out immediately, but despair at the knowledge that billions of lives were still hanging in the balance. His heart pounded in his chest, the enormity of their situation pressing down like a crushing weight. "Is it over?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His wide eyes scanned the cavern as if expecting another sudden shift, another wave of divine power to wash over them. "No," Ellen said, shaking her head, her hands trembling at her sides. "It's not over. We're still standing on the edge of annihilation." The angel's final words echoed in Dr. Simon's mind. "This is humanity's last chance. If you fail again, there will be no more mercy." It was a final grim reprieve, but even the slightest reprieve offered a glimmer of hope, no matter how faint. Yet, He couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of dread. "What are we supposed to do?" Ellen continued, her voice rising with frustration. "He says we still have a chance, but for what? How can we prove anything now? It's already too late." Dr. Simons rubbed his hands over his face, exhaustion and fear clouding his thoughts. "We have to believe that it's not," he replied quietly. "Maybe it's not about proving anything right now. Maybe it's about what comes next. If the angel spares us, maybe we'll be part of what humanity becomes next." "Spare us?" Sam scoffed, a bitter edge to his voice. "How do we know we're even going to be part of this chosen few?" He didn't exactly give us a list. "For all we know, we're just standing around waiting to be wiped out like the rest." Dr. Simons turned to Sam, understanding his frustration. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice heavy with weariness. "But we can't give up now. Not when we've been given even the smallest chance." Sam looked away, pacing the icy ground, clearly struggling to hold on to what little hope they had left. "This isn't real," he muttered under his breath. "This can't be real." Ellen hugged herself, her breath shaky. "It feels like some kind of twisted dream, but it is real, Sam. The angel is real. Everything we've seen." She paused, her eyes darting toward the towering figure, now seated once more on the icy throne, wings folded behind him in eerie stillness. "This is happening." The three of them stood in a heavy silence, each lost in their thoughts, their fears, their futile attempts to understand what the future held. The angel had given them a glimpse of mercy, but that mercy came with an unbearable weight. The knowledge that they were part of something so much larger than themselves, and that humanity's fate hung by the thinnest of threads. Finally, Dr. Simons spoke again, his voice soft but resolute. "Maybe we won't know why we're spared, if we even are. Maybe it's not about understanding all of it. Maybe it's just about being worthy of that chance." "Worthy?" Sam shook his head in disbelief. "We're not worthy of anything. We're just a bunch of scientists who stumbled onto this nightmare. What makes us special?" "I don't know," Dr. Simons replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if we're part of whatever happens next, we have to do better. That's all we can do. We can't change what's already happened." Ellen's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she nodded. I don't want to be part of the world ending. I want to believe we can be part of something better." Dr. Simons put a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "We will be," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. As the moments stretched on, the cavern remained still, the angel motionless upon his throne, as if awaiting some unseen signal. Dr. Simons could feel the pressure mounting, the sense that time itself had come to a standstill. It was impossible to know when or how the angel would act, or if the fate of humanity was already sealed, despite the fragile hope they clung to. Finally, Sam broke the silence. "So, what do we do now? Just wait?" Dr. Simons exhaled deeply, glancing back at the angel's looming figure. "We wait, and we hope," he said. "That's all we can do." And so they waited, standing in the icy cavern, their breath visible in the freezing air, each of them struggling to hold on to the last sliver of hope they had. The angel had given them a final chance, but whether or not they, and humanity, would survive that chance remained to be seen. The minutes felt like hours as the scientists waited in unbearable silence. The angel remained still, seated on his icy throne, eyes closed as if in meditation. Yet, the oppressive energy that filled the cavern was palpable, an invisible force pressing down on their chests, making it hard to breathe. The temperature had dropped even further, the cold biting into their skin, but it was the weight of dread that gripped them most tightly. Ellen paced in small circles, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to ward off more than just the cold. "I can't stand this," she muttered under her breath. "We're just waiting to die." We're waiting for him to decide who gets wiped out and who gets saved, and we don't even know if we're on that list." Dr. Simon stood near her, his gaze fixed on the angel. "I know, but if we panic now, it won't change anything. We need to stay calm, stay together." Sam, slumped against the icy wall, shook his head. "Stay calm? We're standing at the end of the world, and you want us to stay calm?" Dr. Simon shot him a look. "We don't know that for sure. We have to believe there's a chance, any chance." Sam's eyes burned with frustration. "You heard him, didn't you? He's not just wiping out a few people. He's going to cleanse the earth, and we're just supposed to sit here and hope we make it? What kind of chance is that?" The ground beneath their feet rumbled softly, a subtle reminder that the world itself seemed to react to the angel's growing power. Dr. Simons felt the tremor, his pulse quickening as he realized that the judgment was drawing near. "We can't control what happens next," Dr. Simons said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we're still here. We're still alive." "For how long?" Ellen whispered, her voice trembling as she looked toward the angel, who hadn't moved in what felt like an eternity. What if this is it? What if he's already decided? Before Dr. Simons could respond, a low rumbling sound filled the cavern, louder and more ominous than the earlier tremors. The ice beneath their feet began to crack, jagged lines splintering out in every direction. The air itself seemed to pulse with a foreboding energy, and the cavern walls trembled as though the entire structure was groaning under the weight of impending doom. The angel's eyes snapped open, glowing with a blinding light that pierced through the darkness of the cavern. His wings unfurled slowly, each feather gleaming with a cold, divine radiance. He rose from his throne, towering over the scientists like an unyielding force of nature. Dr. Simons felt his heart seize in his chest. This was it, the moment they had all feared. The angel's voice echoed through the cavern, deeper and more powerful than before. "The time has come. The judgment is upon you." The tremors intensified, and the ice beneath them groaned as the cracks widened. The ground was no longer stable, and the scientists stumbled, trying to maintain their balance. Fear surged through them like a tidal wave. There was no escaping this. The end was inevitable. Ellen's face was pale as she whispered, "Oh God, we're not going to make it." Sam, his voice barely audible over the roar of the earth shaking, muttered, "This is it. It's really happening." Dr. Simons wanted to speak, to offer some kind of reassurance, but the words wouldn't come. He stood frozen, watching as the angel's glowing eyes swept over them, his wings casting long dark shadows across the fractured ground. The angel raised his hand, and the cavern trembled violently. The ice and stone groaned as if the earth itself was screaming in agony. The light from the angel's eyes intensified, filling the space with an unbearable brightness. "You were given your chance," the angel intoned, his voice booming like thunder. "But humanity has failed. The time for mercy has passed. Now, you will face the consequences of your actions." The scientists stumbled backward, the ground beneath them quaking with relentless force. Dr. Simons fell to his knees, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps as the air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating. "Please," Ellen cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. "There has to be another way. You can't do this." The angel's gaze turned toward her, unblinking, unmoved. "There is no other way," he said. "You have been weighed, and you have been found wanting. Humanity's fate is sealed." The earth itself seemed to respond to the angel's words, the cracks in the ice spreading rapidly, large fissures splitting open beneath their feet. The ground heaved and buckled, and the sound of ice breaking filled the air, deafening in its intensity. Just as it seemed that the world was tearing itself apart, the angel paused. His hand, still raised to deliver judgment, wavered slightly. His glowing eyes narrowed in contemplation, as if something deep within him was stirring. The scientists, breathless and terrified, stared up at him, hope flickering faintly in their eyes. Was he reconsidering? Was there still a chance? The angel lowered his hand slowly, the tremors subsiding just enough for the ground to stabilize beneath them. His wings remained outstretched, casting an ethereal glow over the cavern, but his expression was unreadable. Dr. Simons struggled to his feet, his voice hoarse as he spoke. What's happening? Why did you stop?" The angel's gaze was distant, as though he was listening to something far beyond their comprehension. For a moment, the only sound was the faint echo of the ice shifting beneath them. And then the angel spoke once more, his voice softer, more contemplative. "Not all will perish." The scientists froze, their hearts skipping a beat. Was this it? Was this the mercy they had hoped for? "A select few," the angel continued, his voice cold and measured. "Those who still carry the light of creation within them will be spared. They will be taken to a place where they may rebuild, where they will have one final chance to prove their worth." Dr. Simon's breath caught in his throat, the weight of the angel's words crashing down on him. You're sparing us?" The angel's eyes flickered with an unsettling light. "You are among the few," he said. "But understand this. This is humanity's last chance. If you fail again, there will be no more mercy. The world will be cleansed, and your kind will be no more." The scientists stood in stunned silence, barely able to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The angel had spared them, but the future remained uncertain. Their fate, and the fate of all humanity, still hung by the thinnest of threads. And with that final proclamation, the angel turned, his wings folding behind him, and he began his journey back to the frozen throne. The weight of the angel's words hung heavy in the air, suffocating the fragile sense of relief that had begun to bloom in the scientists' hearts. They had been spared, yes, but the future was now more uncertain than ever. The angel had made it clear. This was humanity's last chance. If they failed, the world would be purged, and there would be no redemption. Dr. Simons felt his pulse thundering in his ears as he exchanged a glance with Ellen and Sam. Their faces reflected his own, pale, shaken, and overwhelmed. How could they possibly rebuild? How could they carry the burden of humanity's survival on their shoulders? The cavern, once their prison, now seemed even more oppressive as they realized the scale of what lay ahead. The angel, now seated on his throne once more, seemed to retreat into the stillness, his glowing eyes dimming as he returned to his eternal vigil. It was as if he had judged them, past sentence, and now turned away from the world, leaving them to confront the impossible. The silence was shattered by Ellen's voice, soft and tremulous. What if we fail again? How do we know we won't just repeat the same mistakes?" Dr. Simons wished he had an answer. "We'll have to do better," he said, though the words felt hollow. "We'll have to be better." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. They had been spared, yes, but what kind of world awaited them? The angel had said they would be taken to a paradise, a place where they could rebuild. But Dr. Simons couldn't shake the feeling that this paradise would be nothing more than a final, desperate experiment. And if they failed, then it wouldn't just be their world that ended. It would be all of them, erased from existence. Sam looked at the angel, his expression hardening with grim resolve. "It doesn't matter. We don't have a choice. If we're supposed to be the ones to fix this, we'll figure it out. But if we screw it up," his voice trailed off, dark and ominous. Dr. Simons nodded, knowing Sam was right. There was no choice anymore. They had been chosen for reasons they couldn't fully understand, but now it was on them to survive, to carry the weight of every human life that remained. The ground trembled softly beneath them again, and they exchanged uneasy glances. Was the angel preparing to send them to this paradise? Were they about to be whisked away to some untouched garden where they would begin anew? Dr. Simons turned toward the angel, his mouth opening to ask. But before he could speak, the temperature in the cavern dropped further, a biting cold that was almost unbearable. The angel's eyes snapped open once more, burning brighter than ever before. His wings unfurled, and with a sudden violent movement, he rose from his throne, casting an enormous shadow over the cavern. The scientists stumbled back, terror flooding them as the angel's presence seemed to grow even more oppressive. "Your final chance has come," the angel intoned, his voice echoing with dark finality. "But you have misunderstood my mercy." Dr. Simon's heart dropped, ice flooding his veins. Misunderstood? What did he mean? The angel's wings spread wide, casting a chilling wind across the cavern. "I have spared you, yes," he said, his voice growing darker, more menacing. "But you will not be taken to a paradise. You will be left here, in the ruins of your world, to witness the destruction you have wrought." Ellen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, you said. "I said you would be given a chance to rebuild," the angel interrupted coldly. "And you will. But not in some distant paradise, not in some utopia. You will remain here, in the ashes of the world you have destroyed. You will live among the ruins, with the few who remain. You will rebuild from the devastation that you have caused." Dr. Simons felt the blood drain from his face. But how can we?" "You will have no help," the angel continued, his wings beating with a furious wind. "No guidance, no mercy. You will be left to fend for yourselves, to find whatever flickers of light remain in the darkness you created. If you can rebuild, if you can rise from the ashes, then perhaps there will be hope for your kind. But I will not intervene. I will not save you." The cavern shook violently, cracks splitting the ice beneath their feet. The earth itself seemed to groan in agony, as if it too was rejecting the burden humanity had placed upon it. "And know this," the angel said, his voice rising to a thunderous roar. "If you fail, there will be no more chances. You will perish, and the world will remain a barren, forsaken wasteland. Forever." Dr. Simons could barely breathe as the full weight of the angel's words crashed down on him. They weren't being spared. They weren't being saved. They were being condemned to live in the very world they had ruined, to try and scrape together a new beginning from the shattered remains of their civilization. And if they failed, it would all be for nothing. The angel rose higher, his wings stretching out like the wings of death itself. "You will not be taken to the light," he said, his voice a low, ominous growl. "You will be left in the dark to suffer and to rebuild. Or to die." With a final deafening crack, the earth split open beneath them. The scientists screamed as they fell into the darkness, swallowed by the earth's gaping maw. Dr. Simons felt the cold embrace of the abyss as he plummeted, his body weightless in the black void. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was the angel, hovering above the cavern like a vengeful god, his glowing eyes watching them descend into the unknown. The angel, now alone in the silent cavern, slowly descended back to his icy throne. The tremors ceased, the cracks in the earth sealed themselves, and the world above fell deathly still. The judgment had been delivered. The chosen few would be left to claw their way back from the brink, or they would fail, as all humanity had before. As the angel folded his wings behind him, his expression remained cold and unfeeling. There was no triumph, no satisfaction in his actions. He was not a being of mercy or malice. He was simply the instrument of a higher will. And so, the angel sat, motionless once more, waiting in the frozen abyss. Waiting for the end. Waiting for the day when, inevitably, humanity's final light would flicker out, and the world would fall into eternal darkness. And this time, there would be no more judgment, no more mercy, just silence, forever.